Hi guys, and thank you so much for joining me. If you are new here, I'm Kat and I like to talk about true crime, conspiracies and all sorts of related things. Now guys, this is not the story that I wanted to give you in today's video, but I changed my mind because oh my god, goodness me, this one is one which is going to leave you speechless, absolutely speechless. And honestly guys, this is my very first video talking about a cult. Cult? Why am I struggling to pronounce this each time? Oh, each time I'm struggling. Cult, okay. And quite honestly, like I said, this one is going to leave you constantly with your wide open in surprise, and you will find yourself repeating over and over again, oh my goodness. And when you think it can't get any worse than this, it will get much worse. We know that in cults the main factors are manipulation, control and brainwashing. But seriously, this man, he wasn't just some master manipulator, but he's done it for ages. And people became members without even realizing. And even people who weren't members were being manipulated in such a way that I don't even have any words. No. So let's just get on with the story. And I think that this will leave you confused, surprised and whatnot. But before we get started, just a quick disclaimer, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone I talk about in today's video. This is for educational purposes only, and all the information I'm giving you is already found in the public domain. Thank you so much. So guys, please make yourself comfortable. Look, I'm with my makeup on, with my top on and with my pajamas on. Yep, I have my pajama bottoms on. This is the way I work, yeah. Okay, so let's get started. During her first year at Sarah Lawrence College, anyone who spent time with Talia Ray heard her talk about her father, and he was a truth teller who was silenced by a group of powerful, vindictive men. He was sent to prison for his heroic efforts to save her and her young sister from their violent mother, and his imprisonment was the result of government corruption. The sad thing is that we can't even know for sure if indeed the girls were being hurt by their mother because of the depth and period of manipulation that Larry did on seemingly just about everyone around him. Talia, who grew up in New Jersey, became the leader of her group of friends at college, organizing their housing for the next year at Sloaney Woods 9, a two-story dorm in the middle of campus. Talia told her housemates at the beginning of sophomore year that her father was going to be released from prison and would need to stay with them for a while. They were mostly cool with this. Within days of his release, Lawrence, or Larry Ray, moves into Sarah Lawrence campus. He settled in the common area, cooking steak dinners and ordering expensive deliveries for Talia and her 7 housemates. And while they ate, he would tell them stories in a Brooklyn accent about his long and decorated history as a government agent, his former work as an international CIA operative, how he recovered Stinger missiles off the black market and engineered a ceasefire in Kosovo. Larry loved to preach the values of the Marine Corps and talked about his relationships with high-ranking American military officers. Larry was of an average height and he was quite overweight, yet he can be quite intimidating. He had a clean-shaved head and preferred wearing polo shirts to make his frame look bulky, muscly, strong, to make sure that he gives that vibe of being the strong, intimidating person. He seemed to behave like a macho man, aggressive and tough, and of course on campus this was really out of place, and he was 50 years old at the time. He would often ask Talia's friends if they work out, if they know how to defend themselves, and he would also make remarks of them looking quite weak in comparison to him, this strong, manly man. At the same time, he could also be charming. He was a very good listener and engaged the group on important topics such as truth and justice. He would do all of their cleaning, and he really wanted to portray himself as the fatherly figure of the group. He took on the dad role in the house in a big way. You can already tell the tactic he's using with his kids. He knows very well they are all on campus, their parents are not around, maybe some of them are even homesick, and so he grasps at the vulnerabilities in this group, and he is already starting to insert himself in their emotions and struggles. He would watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos in the common room, where the students would watch from pillows on the floor, and when the episode finished, Larry would give them a lecture on the nature of the universe, and at night he would sleep on an air mattress in Talia's room or on the common room's sofa. Before we move on any further, guys, I just need to warn you that this might contain some descriptions of a nature that might upset some of you, of sexual nature. And also, this video is going to be typically much longer than what I am usually publishing on the channel, and simply because I didn't want to split this video in two parts so you can better understand everything that happened. And I feel like if I would split it in two parts and publish one now and another one in a couple of days time, then you kind of lose the same feeling that you have like when you hear the full story. Because that's exactly what I did when I did the script for this video and the research for the video. I didn't stop until I completely finished it throughout the whole day. That's how much I got so deep into it, you know. So I wanted you to get the same feeling as I did, and I felt that I would do it justice if everything is in one video. Okay, so enough with the chit chat, let's carry on. Carl Sagan's Cosmos explores 15 billion years of cosmic evolution and the development of science and civilization. He traces the origins of knowledge and the scientific method, mixing science and philosophy, and speculates about the future of science. And this is what Larry and all the kids in the dorm would watch. Going back to Sarah Lawrence College and the students. The college is located just above the city limits of New York, 15 miles north of Times Square. The residents of Slonim 9 dorm were typical Sarah Lawrence students, an artistic, well-read group of introverts with good grades. They were sensitive and, you know, relatable to 19-year-olds searching for guidance, really. You are, you know, just out of your teenage years, but not quite an adult yet, still working on figuring out who they are and what they want to be. Daniel Barban Levin just began exploring his sensuality. Claudia and Santos struggled with depression. Another roommate, Isabella, went through a bad breakup soon after Larry arrived. So you can see that these were, you know, typical issues of around that age. Larry had been well received by all of them, and no one really questioned it, mostly because he was such a huge part of Talia's life, Talia being his daughter. They were even talking about getting a big bag of sand and dumping it out on the kitchen floor to just make a tiny beach. It wasn't a boring household to begin with. Larry would sometimes tell the kids they came together in part because of a shared obsession with taking their own lives. In fact, Santos, according to his parents, tried to end his life in high school. Larry claimed he could help all of them. He said he knew techniques to discipline the mind, training he received from the government, and he even began counseling a few of the roommates, including Isabella, Talia's best friend. Isabella came to Sarah Lawrence on a full academic scholarship from an all-girls Catholic high school in San Antonio. After her breakup, she seemed to take comfort in Larry's company. Being that she was 19, she was just trying to make sense of things. She wasn't in a good place, and according to her, Larry was helping her process and make sense of a lot of things which she couldn't make sense of on her own. Talia's boyfriend at the time saw Larry and Isabella reclining on Talia's bed. Larry was stroking Isabella's hair, soothing her and saying that no one is going to hurt his baby girl, referring to Isabella. Larry then went on to say he was going to start sleeping in Isabella's room. Obviously, this made Talia's boyfriend quite uncomfortable, and rightly so. Larry wasn't really happy about that, and he even told her boyfriend that it wasn't like he's going to sleep with her, he will sleep on the floor, and she, just needed someone to help her. Isabella was fragile, but a lot of people in that building were just the same as Isabella. And I think that this is what Larry was looking for, so he can manipulate and brainwash. He actually found the weak spots. The night before Isabella was supposed to go home for winter break, Larry called her family. According to Isabella's aunt, Larry told her mother that Isabella was SA'd as a child by a family friend, and that if she goes home for break, she might try to end her life. Isabella's mother was really surprised by this. She was always close to her daughter, and she never once heard Isabella mention anything about any kind of SA. Larry then told Isabella's mom that she let that happen to her own daughter. Isabella ended up spending winter break with Larry, Talia and Talia's boyfriend in a one-bedroom condo on East 93rd Street owned by Lee Chen, an old friend of Larry's. Talia and her boyfriend slept in the living room while Isabella and Larry shared the bedroom. According to Talia's boyfriend, Larry would control every aspect of their lives once they were in that apartment. What they ate, what they did, and even when they went to bed. Larry even told Talia's boyfriend to stop taking his prescribed antipsychotic medication. He was so disturbed by Larry's behavior that he broke up with Talia as soon as winter break ended. Let's not forget that Talia is Larry's own daughter. Larry returned to Slonim 9 dorm for the spring semester, spending most of his nights in Isabella's room. One night, Larry got everyone in the common room and began lecturing on Q4P, a philosophy based on the supposition that all energy in the universe is powered by the quest for potential. Q4P was the brainchild of Larry's friend David Birnbaum, a diamond district dealer who moonlights as a philosopher. I actually looked this guy up, and he's a diamond and precious gems jeweler, and he only sells to the elite. He's based in New York, and he sells the most expensive diamonds and precious gems to A-listers. So it seems that Larry is quite well connected. Another of Talia's roommate, Claudia, was particularly intrigued by the Q4P presentation, and she began having weekly counseling sessions with Larry. Claudia grew up on the outskirts of Los Angeles. In high school, she was part of a group of close friends who spent weekends writing poetry, taking pictures, and talking about boys. She was really smart and very creative. She seemed to be best at telling stories. She would sometimes stretch the truth for effect, although in innocent ways. Her friends called her out for claiming to like a band that she'd never even listened to. Another time, she pretended to faint in Spanish class. Claudia really just wanted to make herself more exciting. Claudia was initially intimidated by Larry, particularly by his relationship with Talia, his daughter. But she seemed to change after she started those private sessions with him, and it was like something just snapped. Before, Claudia was funny and self-aware. Now, she just seemed to fake being happy and cheerful. She kept posting about the Marines on Facebook. More concerning to her friends, Claudia began telling people that she believed she might be schizophrenic, a diagnosis that Larry, who had no medical training whatsoever, gave her during one of their sessions. Daniel, another student, initially found Larry's philosophical musings nonsensical and believed Claudia's trust in his so-called mental health counseling seemed kind of weird. He wasn't a professional. Claudia had complex issues and real stuff going on. Really, a therapist would be the only person able to help her. But Larry claimed to have superhuman level of empathy or ability to talk to young people and help them work through their issues. Near the end of the school year, Daniel found himself completely detached. His relationship with his girlfriend was crumbling and he had nowhere to live that summer. Santos and Claudia pleaded with him to speak to Larry. Daniel and Larry met in a Starbucks one afternoon and they ended up chatting for hours. Larry gave him advice that felt quite straightforward: to dump his girlfriend. When it came to Daniel's sensuality, Larry told him he was definitely not gay. Daniel felt without any direction, and all of a sudden this real man came into his life. Larry gave him validation. He was finally being seen and heard. Larry offered to help Daniel achieve clarity. After their conversation, Larry walked Daniel outside and into a limousine waiting up the block where his roommates were also waiting. They went to the apartment on East 93rd Street, and when they arrived, Larry said Daniel should live there for the summer with him and some of the other students, and of course Daniel agrees. He didn't want to go back home, and honestly this was the only alternative. Every morning that summer in the apartment on 93rd Street started exactly the same way. Larry would listen to Baba O'Reilly, which is a song by the English rock band The Who. This song is also known as Teenage Wasteland, and with this in mind, I think Larry's message becomes quite clear. His plan is to take it upon himself to guide the young adults Daniel, his daughter Talia, Claudia, Isabella and Santos through their own teenage wasteland. The life they had in that apartment wasn't much different from living in a college dorm. They had family meals, movie nights, and friendship taken too seriously with intense topics of conversation which would drag on the whole night. Daniel was working at a vegan ice cream shop in the East Village that summer. Larry seemed to have several streams of income. He was a life consultant for a wealthy friend, and he was building a domain name business he asked the kids help with. He could be extremely generous, sometimes even buying the roommates expensive clothing or shoes, and he would occasionally take them out to dinners at upscale steakhouses. Always paid for with cash he kept in a backpack that he carried with him at all times. He had a limo driver on call to take them home no matter the hour. Larry's plan of personal transformation happened on the nights they would stay in the apartment. After dinner, everyone would get to the living room for a conversation in which the group interrogated one person about anything and everything. Usually, the person being questioned landed in the hot seat because he or she did something Larry didn't like. Any kind of insignificant mistakes, such as scratching a pen or breaking a plate, were considered intentional manifestations of childhood trauma. According to Larry, the group's session goal was to reveal deep personal truths. These so-called sessions would often end in breakthroughs that followed a disturbing dream logic. On one occasion, Larry convinced Daniel that the reason he played the ukulele was because of trauma inflicted on him by his father. Larry then told Daniel to smash the instrument in front of the group as an act of catharsis. When this was done, the group applauded Daniel for achieving closure. Daniel felt unbelievable pressure to find explanations for his actions. Once, after spending hours in the hot seat with no end in sight, Daniel told a story that finally got Larry's attention. Quote, "I said when I was a kid I found a baby bird in my driveway and it was injured and I held it in my hand and crushed it. I claimed this was a traumatic thing that formed me." End of quote. This story was obviously completely made up, but luckily for Daniel it ended the session. So Larry, you can tell, would stop only when he would hear what he wanted to hear and not the truth. Daniel would wake up the next morning to Baba O'Reilly and go to his job completely shattered. But Larry never seemed to get tired himself. He preached the benefits of prescription amphetamines, and according to multiple acquaintances, he took them in such high doses he rarely needed any sleep. Larry pushed the roommates to live healthier lifestyles. Claudia was particularly motivated to adopt Larry's eating and exercise routine. According to her mother, she became obsessed on losing weight and increasingly unhappy with the way she looked. From the first time they heard about Larry, Claudia's parents were very suspicious of him. When they realized he was living in Slonim 9 dorm, they met with Alan Green, Sarah Lawrence's Dean of Student Life. Alan told them he received other complaints about Larry, but his hands were really tied because a father had the right to visit his daughter on campus. A second meeting ended with pretty much the same results. Sarah Lawrence College said they had no record that Larry Ray lived on campus at any time. Claudia's parents moved to the Upper East Side after she started at Sarah Lawrence. That summer they were living just a few blocks from the 93rd Street apartment. They saw their daughter about once a week when she came home to get a change of clothing or to drop something off. And Claudia was behaving just like Larry. She would say things that sounded like they came out of Larry's mouth. For example, in the Marines you would do this, you exercise and you only eat healthy food. Claudia became very critical of her parents. She would criticize them on how they were running the household, like not getting dinner on the table on time. On 93rd Street, however, tiny mistakes weren't just symbols of childhood trauma, but evidence that the kids were trying to sabotage Larry's program of self-improvement. Disruptive behavior was explored in meticulous detail and required written, signed confessions. In one of these confessions, Santos wrote that he threw out around 5 checkbooks and ripped out pages from at least 2 and detailed plans to interfere with Larry's business and not let him work by making sure to take up his time and waste it. Daniel remembers delivering similar letters to Larry, listing items he damaged as part of an intentional effort to harm Larry's family. Daniel now believes the confession served to cement Larry's psychological conditioning, all the pressure he put on all of them to believe that they did all of these terrible things to him and his family. The confession process demanded that Daniel reconfigure his own memories to reconcile them with Larry's accusations. Over the years, Larry would collect hundreds of pages of such confessions from the students. Many of them used almost identical language. So again, very simplified, the kids would need to lie just so their stories aligned with what Larry wanted. You know, psychological conditioning, I won't go into the formal definition on this occasion, but I will just say it in my own words because I think that the following example pretty much sums it up. You lie for so long and you keep repeating the same lie over and over again, and eventually you imprint the lie in your brain and then you end up believing your own lie to be the truth. This is exactly what Larry did to these kids. He would repeat over and over again whatever he wanted to imprint in their brains, and he would make them repeat this themselves over and over again until eventually they were unable to tell the difference between the lie and the actual truth. And quite honestly, guys, only talking about this and only reading what I'm reading at this point, it's already becoming overwhelming to me that I'm only reading it. Now imagine those kids being in those situations at that age and being particularly fragile. Imagine what this did to them. Take for example the confessions, the ukulele and the childhood violence, and later on we'll see how they end up accusing themselves of poisoning Larry, even though that wasn't true, but they all believed it was. Things became more difficult for Daniel when Larry took a deeper interest in his sensual education. One night Isabella came out of the bedroom and began kissing Daniel on the couch. At first he believed that Isabella was just acting on a crush, but a few weeks later Larry guided the two of them into the bedroom, instructing Daniel and Isabella to have intercourse while he watched. Now keep in mind, Isabella and Daniel are just 19-year-old kids. Larry is a 50-year-old adult man. This is just beyond disgusting. These sessions became regular, and Larry would sometimes even participate in them. He made it seem as if his presence were part of Daniel's and Isabella's journeys to achieve clarity. Once, Larry even invited Chen, his friend, the landlord, to join them. Daniel obviously got really freaked out. There was no consent there. Isabella may have seemed to be pursuing all of this, but her mind was being twisted by Larry. But it wasn't enough for Daniel to leave the apartment. He was feeling like this could be unusual and weird, but then everyone else seemed to think he was really good. At one point he believed that maybe something was wrong with him and he needed to embrace it and experience it. At the end of the summer, Claudia and Daniel left to study abroad in England. Before leaving, Claudia sent a long email to Ellen Green, the Sarah Lawrence Dean, with the subject line, "The Truth." She wrote that when Larry first moved into Sloanim 9 dorm, she expressed fears and concerns about him being a bad, dangerous, manipulative, and sexually deviant man. But after spending the summer with Larry, Claudia took it all back, and she claimed that Larry's ex-wife tricked her into making her initial statements. So now, to better understand the kind of person Lawrence really is, we need to go back to the time he was born and his early years. But before we do that, I think it's just about the right time to take a tiny break. A tiny water break, drink break, snack break, whatever you guys want. You can pause the video and then come back to it. Born Lawrence Greco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn in 1959, Larry lived on the blurry edges, both professionally and socially, for most of his adult life. He hung around politicians, top military officials, restaurant owners and business owners. According to someone who was there, a couple in the Genovese family, Salvatore, nicknamed Sally Dogs Lombardi, even attended his wedding in 1988. Larry was the kind of guy who talked a bunch of nonsense. However, there was usually a seed of truth, just enough to keep people's attention. Larry was a chameleon. He could be a good boy or a patriot, or he would pull out a pipe and fake glasses and he would be an intellectual. He would juggle 10 different people at the same time, telling each of them one piece of a story he wanted them to know and convincing them that he wanted them to be part of his master plan. Larry worked on Wall Street in the early 80s even though he didn't have a college degree. He later became a consultant helping clients in the insurance, construction, finance and gambling industries. He claimed to be a partner in a popular Italian restaurant where he held fundraisers for politicians, including one for Patrick Kennedy in 1993. He also co-owned Malibu, a nightclub in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, and took meetings with Peter Gattian in an effort to buy Gattian's Manhattan nightclubs, including Tunnel and the Limelight. Frank Di Tommaso, who ran a large construction firm, was friends with Larry, and he eventually hired him to help make introductions. Frank said about Larry, there he was dealing with government officials, very credible and prominent politicians. He even introduced him to Marine generals and colonels. Colonels. Again, the pronunciation, guys. Ooh. According to official records, Larry's military service was limited to 19 days in the Air Force in 1981, but he hung around many prominent Marines, including General Charles Pittman and retired Marine Commandant General James L. Jones. Larry claimed that he and Pittman once planned an operation to capture and extradite Assata Shakur from Cuba. It was just one of many stories about his international happenings laid out in court documents. In the early 1990s, Larry tried to make advances with the post-Soviet Russian economy and even contracted with the CIA. He also repeatedly said that NATO officially dispatched him to Moscow in 1999 to stop a bombing campaign in Kosovo, even though, by his own admission, he knew nothing about the war. And whenever someone challenged Larry on this claim, he would present a letter written on official NATO letterhead thanking him for his efforts to ensure good communication and understanding between themselves and the Russian leadership. Now, no matter how fantasized it seems, at least some of it is true. I remember him being around. Chris Donnelly, the NATO official who wrote the letter, said he remembers Larry being around. He was connected and maybe he made some calls for them, as many other people did at the same time. And Chris just wrote a letter for anyone who was involved. I mean, this kind of letter would be very similar to the one that my daughter, for example, received from the Queen here in England. She sent the Queen a birthday card and she received a reply back thanking her for the wishes. But of course, on this occasion, it wasn't the actual Queen who sent the reply, and we all know that. I mean, everybody knows that. It was someone else doing it on her behalf, but of course, it sounds much better when you say that the letter is from the Queen, right? And this is what basically Larry does. He's just embellishing the truth. Of all Larry's relationships with powerful people, one in particular would prove the most significant in the years to come. In 1995, Larry met a young NYPD detective named Bernie Kerik. Kerik had recently been promoted from being Mayor Rudy Giuliani's driver to the director of the New York City Department of Corrections Investigations Division. Kerik was impressed by Larry, who exuded a macho streetwise charisma and had valuable connections, and the two soon became friends. A few years later, Larry served as Kerik's best man at his wedding, and for a time Kerik would sign emails to Larry, signed Love B. Larry was happy to help push Kerik's professional advancement. While in Russia, Larry became friends with Pavel Palachenko, Mikhail Gorbachev's longtime interpreter. In 1997, Larry and his friends played host to Gorbachev when the statesman visited New York, arranging security and transportation in Larry's own car. When Gorbachev made a stop in LA, Larry even arranged a meeting between Gorbachev and Robert De Niro. De Niro believed that it was really odd that that guy was the one who arranged the meeting. As a favor to Detective Kerik, Larry also arranged for Gorbachev to sit down with Mayor Giuliani. Photos of the meeting made national headlines, and 1 month later, Mayor Giuliani appointed Detective Kerik commissioner of the Department of Correction. But I'm quite sure that Larry did this for a very specific reason. He knew that he will benefit from this later on, or try to anyway. I don't think that Larry ever did any favors for no reason. Kerik helped introduce Larry to some of his law enforcement contacts, including an FBI agent named Gary Ewer. Larry claimed he could give Gary with the FBI information on his mafia contacts, so Gary naturally took on Larry as an informant. The two began meeting 3 or 4 times a week, and one of the most promising pieces of evidence Larry claimed to have was information on a pump and dump stock scheme operated in part by a capo in the Gambino family, Eddie Garofalo. Larry told the FBI agent he could give information about the scheme, so when Larry later said that Garofalo put a hit out on him, the FBI agent believed him. According to FBI reports, the agency paid approximately $10,000 for a security system to be installed in Larry's home. The reports, however, paint Larry as an unreliable informant who dangled the prospect of critical evidence only to later confuse them. After a few years of working with Larry, the FBI agent realized that he used his role as an FBI informant as a cover for his own involvement in Garofalo's scheme. Needless to say, the FBI agent hates Larry because of all his lies. In 2015, the FBI agent worked as a bodyguard for Donald Trump, and it was Detective Carrick who made the introduction. In March 2000, federal prosecutors in Brooklyn indicted 19 defendants, including Larry, for their involvement in the securities fraud scheme. Larry was charged with agreeing to pay a $100,000 bribe to the executive of a bond brokerage on behalf of Garofalo. Prosecutors acknowledged that Larry provided useful background information to the FBI, but nothing that helped the investigation in any significant way. In fact, they argued Larry repeatedly lied to the FBI. And now, guys, if we look back on this, Larry, even though he didn't provide enough substantial information, I think that he truthfully implicated himself in this without even realizing, as soon as he mentioned the information that he had about this scheme. So I think that when Larry mentioned the scheme to the FBI obviously, naturally, they became interested in this scheme and they went to investigate further. And then Larry kind of dug up his own grave. In asking for leniency, Larry pointed to his efforts to help the US government in other capacities. In addition to his work in Kosovo, he said that the FBI agent once dispatched him to Russia to lure an unindicted co-conspirator in the pump and dump scheme back to the US. Larry also claimed to have recovered Stinger missiles off the black market for the US government, something Felix Sater also reportedly did. But the court was unmoved. He couldn't manipulate them. When it was clear that the conviction was inevitable, Larry made a desperate plea to Detective Carrick, who was by then a year into yet another new job. He was the commissioner of the NYPD. Larry wrote Carrick an email begging his friend to put in a good word with the US Attorney's Office and ask him to be there for him. Carrick responded the next day saying he would do anything for Larry, but in his present position, he just couldn't interfere. So you see, this is the favor that Larry was hoping to get, or a similar kind of favor when he did all those favors for Carrick. He didn't do them for just being such a good friend. He obviously had a reason behind that. Larry pleaded guilty to securities fraud, and in 2003 he was sentenced to 5 years probation. At his sentencing hearing, the judge accused Larry of manipulating the court and promised to throw the book at him if he violated his probation. While Larry was on trial, Carrick's star was on the rise. The police commissioner's visibility in the wake of 9/11 springboarded him to the national stage. He appeared regularly on TV and did a stint as an advisor in Iraq. The city renamed Manhattan's jail the Bernard B. Carrick Complex. Then, on December the 3rd, 2004, George W. Bush nominated Carrick to be Secretary of Homeland Security. A week later, Carrick withdrew his nomination, citing the fact that he had once employed an undocumented nanny. But check this out. I told you that Larry doesn't do anything for no reason, and he stops at nothing to try and get himself out of a situation by yet again manipulating it. 2 days after Carrick's withdrawal, the Daily News broke a story that chronicled a multitude of irregularities stemming from his relationship with Larry. The story alleged that Larry paid for Carrick's wedding, bought Carrick $4,600 worth of furniture, and gave him a customized Tiffany police badge. And Larry was the news story's primary source. If Larry was looking for revenge for Carrick not helping him, he definitely at this point got it. Carrick was publicly humiliated. The city took his name off the jail, his affair with editor Judith Regan was made public, and he faced city, state and federal investigations. Eventually, in 2009, Carrick pleaded guilty to felony theft and false statement charges, and he served 3 years in prison. Carrick's perceived betrayal seemed to shift something inside Larry, or maybe Larry's duplicity was catching up to him. Regardless, the conviction marked a change in Larry's behavior. He became more evil and his targets became even more personal. In 2004, his wife Teresa filed for divorce, and a few months later, Teresa called the police to their house and claimed Larry hit her. A source close to the family said that when police showed up, Larry and Talia, his daughter, then 15 years old, accused Teresa of child violence. And I think, once again, he did this for revenge because his wife called the police on him. He is getting way too personal, involving people close to him. New Jersey's Child Welfare Department gave Larry temporary custody of the children. Over the next few months, the department received multiple anonymous complaints accusing Teresa of physical and SA. Talia also accused her grandfather, cousin, and aunt of her. Larry created websites and posted graphic accusations of child violence against Teresa and her family. Very often, Larry's blogs featured letters allegedly written by Talia that read like journal entries. Quote, "You are the single most dangerous thing to me in my entire life." End of quote. One letter to Teresa started, "Now, Larry is full on set on destroying his wife and her family." Child welfare investigators determined that the allegations against Teresa were unfounded. But before closing the investigation, a psychological evaluation of the family members commissioned by Teresa's lawyers and submitted to the court characterized Larry as literally impossible to evaluate because he is able to manipulate and control almost any situation in which he finds himself, including a psychological interview with a forensic examiner, no matter how experienced that examiner may be. Mr. Ray is very good at what he does. The report went on to say that Larry can be utterly charming and one can be disarmed by his childlike simplicity and smile. But Mr. Ray is no child. He is a calculating, manipulative and hostile man. The report concluded that Larry manipulated Talia, his own daughter, into making violence allegations that fit no discernible pattern ever reported to the examiner, who has been evaluating families for 20 years. The examiner found that neither Talia nor her younger sister had been abused physically or and characterized Larry and Talia's accusations against Teresa as rehearsed. When the examiner asked Talia's 4-year-old sister if her mother hit her, she started laughing. "That's what Daddy tells me to say," she said. Oh my god, you guys, this is beyond disturbing and honestly fascinating at the same time. I don't even have words, and to hear what the psychological evaluation said is just unbelievable. Not even an examiner evaluating families for 20 years was able to evaluate Larry. Now imagine for a second what this would do to an to a 19 years old. What was Larry capable of doing to a 19-year-old? He had practiced so many years before he even lived on that campus. He's done it to his daughter when she was only 15 years old. He's done it to so many people over time. He destroyed so many lives. Going back to his family now. When a final court order demanded Larry turn his children over to Teresa, he refused, and he was charged with contempt and interference with custody. He spent 6 months in jail. But instead of living with her mother, Talia chose to live in youth shelters. She was like his soldier. Talia is a really loving person, and sadly, she is the biggest victim of all. Behind this mass plot to undo him, Larry claimed, was his former friend Bernie Kerik. He even said that Kerik aligned himself with his wife Teresa in 2004 and even with Mayor Giuliani and his whole camp, and he used the family court against him. This is what Larry told conspiracy theorist A.J. Weberman for his book Homotag, The Secret Life of Rudy Giuliani. According to Larry's blog posts at the time, judges, prosecutors, police, federal agents, and even his own lawyers were working on behalf of Kerik. Larry gave ever-changing explanations for Kerik's motivations. Sometimes Kerik was out for revenge, other times Kerik and Giuliani, Bush and Dick Cheney were trying to silence Larry because he knew secrets about 9/11. He told the city investigator looking into Kerik that on 3 occasions, people in mysterious vehicles pulled up beside him and shot at his car, barely missing him each time. He wouldn't let the Kerik business go. It seems that this revenge knows no bounds or no limits. Very soon, everything in Larry's life would connect back to Kerik. In 2006, Larry was arrested after his then girlfriend accused him of trapping her in their apartment, pinning her down and putting his hand over her nose and mouth. After making bail, Larry spoke with a detective who, in his report, wrote that Larry said that he is currently involved in a major government investigation and that this DV incident was made up to place him in a bad light. Eventually, his former girlfriend withdrew her complaint and the case was dismissed. I think that she just had enough of his bullshit and just, wanted to get the heck away from him. The DV arrest was one reason federal prosecutors argued in 2007 that Larry violated his probation in the pump and dump conviction. The government declared him a fugitive and US Marshals spent weeks trying to find him. Eventually, they were able to track his cell phone to Chan's apartment on East 93rd Street. 5 marshals broke down the door and found Larry and Talia inside. The marshals pinned Larry to the ground and handcuffed him, breaking his arm. According to the Washington Post, one marshal recalled hearing Talia scream, "Police corruption, this is because of Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Bernard Kerik." Now you remember that Daniel and Claudia left to study abroad over in England. Well, even the distance of the Atlantic Ocean wasn't enough to keep Larry from Daniel and Claudia. One time they met up so Larry could Skype in for a family meeting, and then he went on to coach them through SEX. So he was trying to coach them through that. Both Claudia and Daniel spent their winter break in the apartment on the Upper East Side, and when their time abroad was over, Larry welcomed them back for the summer. Once school started again, Daniel continued to live in the apartment, commuting to Bronxville for class. Claudia got on-campus housing but still visited the apartment and stayed close with Larry. The apartment Larry rented was a small space already, but when Larry began doing his own renovations, it seemed like the apartment just began to shrink. He removed the door handles on both bathrooms, which meant that no one had any privacy. It was already established that everything Larry did was for a very good reason, so no one was questioning anything. In the meantime, as expected, Daniel's relationship with his parents was crumbling. His father wrote an email to him during winter break of his senior year saying he can't reach him and being worried, asking what changed. He really didn't understand. His father pointed out this only seems to happen when he is at Larry's, but his father can't quite figure it out. He's asking about a trance or perhaps drugs being involved. I mean, he's getting close though, isn't he? His father. There's some kind of truth in there. I would say more likely a trance, like I said previously, psychological conditioning, manipulation, brainwashing. I mean, oh my god, these poor kids. Even though Daniel's parents were distressed by their son's relationship with Larry, they never tried any dramatic intervention. And later on, Daniel understood why. His parents knew him and they knew there is no way that they will be able to change his mind. They were afraid because Daniel said it on countless occasions he would just stop talking with them if they were not on board with Larry. Larry, on the other hand, was making sure that all the kids were turning against their parents. You can see what he's doing here. He's distancing them from their own families. He's isolating them because he wants to be the only one to control them. His tactic is very, very similar to grooming, although on a much, much deeper level. Claudia's mother had similar fears. Her parents spoke to her so many times and had so many arguments because they believed Larry wasn't good for her, but she couldn't be convinced either. They still didn't realize how serious he was until it was too late. You guys, if you haven't heard this story before, you cannot begin to imagine where this is leading to. One weekend night, Claudia showed up at her parents' apartment with Larry and she began asking about her mother's first child, a girl who died at birth. Larry said it must have been difficult for her to love Claudia, having just gotten over the loss. I mean, this is just crazy. He's doing that to her mother in front of her, in front of Claudia. He's a very arrogant individual and he has no problem whatsoever stabbing you straight to your face. Claudia's mother was obviously shocked and she even asked him what was he on about. So of course at this point her mother is trying to reassure Claudia that what Larry is saying simply isn't true. And she even tells them that when Claudia was born, it was the joy of their lives and Claudia was everything to them. But Larry kept digging and digging until Claudia's poor mother exploded crying. He was really trying to break them down. I mean, guys, everyone knows, and you don't need to be a therapist or a professional to figure it out. When you have a stillborn or a miscarriage, your rainbow baby is going to fill you with so much love, and it feels like such an overwhelming love that you don't know what to do with it. Apart to give it all to your rainbow baby, because you lost one and so you appreciate the other one thousands of times more. Sorry guys, I got a bit sidetracked here. I myself went through a miscarriage years ago and I know in my heart what he said was completely untrue and devastating for someone like Claudia's parents to hear. But poor Claudia, she was being manipulated and she was on Larry's team and her parents were on the other team. Claudia said that she didn't believe her mom and she didn't believe she could love Claudia because of the baby girl who passed away at birth. She then just left with Larry. That's when Claudia's parents knew that Larry had complete control over her. It's just heart-wrenching, honestly. Daniel experienced the worst of Larry's attentions his senior year after Talia missed the application deadline for Stanford Law School. Larry accused Daniel of intentionally sabotaging his daughter by distracting her. In a confession session that night, Daniel denied having anything to do with the missed deadline. As usual, unhappy with Daniel's denial, Larry crushed pieces of aluminum foil into tiny balls and rolled them up inside a string of saran wrap, which is food plastic wrap, fashioning what Daniel described as a necklace of metal lumps. Larry called it a garrote. In front of the group, Larry ordered Daniel to wrap the invention around his testicles and penis. Then Larry began twisting it. The metal cut off circulation to his genitals and dug into his flesh. And this wasn't the first time that Larry was showing violence. According to the landlord, Chen, Larry would regularly maltreat Santos, often putting the 20-year-old in a sleeper hold until he passed out. "Did the darkness envelop you?" he would ask when Santos woke up. One time, after Daniel apparently damaged the oven, Larry asked him to kneel and then stood over him with a knife and threatened to dismember him. On one of Daniel's final visits to the apartment, he told Larry he was still feeling unsure about his sensual orientation. But Larry had enough of that, and he asked Isabella to give Daniel one of her dresses. In front of all the housemates, Larry told Daniel to put on the dress, go collect the mail from the building's lobby. And then, when he returned, Larry handed Daniel a vibrating massage wand toy and ordered him to pleasure himself at the back. Daniel followed Larry's command whilst his friends were laughing at him. Daniel was, of course, humiliated by Larry. He was feeling scared, ashamed, and he was crying. Larry always told Daniel that everything that happened in that apartment was for his own good. But after that experience, Daniel finally found the courage to leave. In 2013, spring semester of his senior year, he got on-campus housing. He stopped responding to phone calls or emails from anyone living in the 93rd Street apartment. But this is not over. Just as Daniel was escaping Larry's grasp, others were being drawn in. In the fall of 2011, while Daniel and Claudia were abroad, Santos introduced Larry to his older sisters, Yaliza and Felicia. Santos' parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic to the Bronx in the early 80s. They had a small travel agency and a grocery store in Washington Heights and saved just enough to buy a home in the Bronx. They gave their kids top-tier educations. Yaliza was an undergrad at Columbia when she first started visiting the apartment on 93rd Street. Felicia, the eldest of the three and a Harvard graduate, had a medical degree from Columbia. She started her residency in LA when Larry began calling her regularly. It wasn't long before Larry convinced Felicia that people were after her. She became worried for her parents because it involved Bernard Carrick and the police. She felt it wouldn't be effective going to the police in California as they were corrupt. Felicia abandoned her residency program and moved in with Larry. Very soon they began a romantic relationship, often talking about marriage and having children together. Larry referred to both Felicia and Isabella as his wife. Larry has a long history of manipulating women. According to multiple people who knew him in the 90s, it was common for Larry to offer sex with his girlfriend to friends and business associates. He actually had a long-term girlfriend while still being married to Teresa. Not doing what Larry wanted always had consequences. According to one person, when his girlfriend tried to leave their relationship, Larry sent graphic pictures of her to her parents. When a different girlfriend broke up with him, Larry purchased a GPS tracking device and, according to a police report, tried to get someone to attach it to her car. At least 2 associates of Larry's described witnessing situations in which they felt some of the women Larry lived with were being offered up for pleasure purposes. Larry also made up scenarios that required the roommate to pay him. His usual tactic was to claim that people had either stolen things from him or ruined things of value and therefore owed him money. Santos once sent an email to Larry with the subject line, "Prices of your things I damaged, ruined with preliminary total." The email was a 5-page accounting of more than 50 items ranging from painting tape priced at $9.87 to a gas range priced at $6,780. The total he calculated was $47,726.79. $47,000. Santos asked help from his parents, threatening to end his life if they didn't give him the money to repay Larry. His father tried to visit the apartment to see the damage his son apparently did, but when he arrived, Larry came to the lobby and blocked him from going up. Out of fear for their son's safety, Santos's parents gave him as much money as they could. Toward the end of senior year, Larry took Claudia, Isabella, Yaliza, and Felicia to his stepfather's house in Pinehurst, North Carolina. There, he asked them to install a new drainage system in the yard, even though they had absolutely no idea how to do that. When they returned, Claudia, Yaliza, and Isabella began asking their friends and family for money, saying they damaged Larry's property. Santos's parents estimate that they gave Larry more than $200,000 over 3 years. They were forced to sell their house to cover the costs. They went to the NYPD 3 times with their story, but police told them there wasn't much that could be done if their children were over the age of 18. Claudia's parents also alerted the police and were told exactly the same thing. In 2017, the police conducted a wellness check on Claudia and determined that she was acting of her own free will. From her parents' perspective, and I think we can agree with that, nothing could be further from the truth. One night in 2013, Yaliza's parents got a call from a doctor at Mount Sinai Hospital. Yaliza attempted to end her life by swallowing a bottle of Tylenol, and she was in a coma. When she woke up, she was transferred to a hospital in White Plains where her parents visited her every day. But one day, security wouldn't let them into their daughter's room, and if they wanted to meet with Yaliza's doctor, they needed to do it with Larry present. Larry was able to examine her when she was in a coma, look at lab results, and make suggestions to her medical team. Yaliza said that he saved her life. Now, I don't know if the Tylenol story is true, that she really did take that. I couldn't quite verify this information, but my thought is that somehow Larry manipulated her into doing that, and Larry convinced her and brainwashed her into trying to end her life by drinking Tylenol. And I think that he did that further to control her, and that's why he even told doctors that her parents couldn't see her, so that he has full control over her. When Claudia's parents rushed to Mount Sinai in 2014 after their daughter swallowed a bottle of Tylenol, they found a similar scene. Claudia would talk to Larry, but not with them. Her mother even asked the head nurse what he was doing there, and the nurse replied it wasn't the first time they've seen him. According to family and friends, only Santos tried to take his own life before meeting Larry. Since then, Isabella, Yaliza, and Claudia have all attempted to take their lives. Larry later estimated their total number of attempts at more than 12. Daniel, Talia, and Isabella graduated in the spring of 2013. Santos never graduated. Claudia graduated a semester late in the winter of 2013. Larry attended her commencement ceremony. According to Claudia's mother, Ellen Green, the dean of students, approached her and Claudia's father and said that he was glad he won't be seeing Larry anymore. That same night, Claudia's parents arranged for a celebration dinner. The only people they knew were Larry and the girls, and they had to leave early because they just didn't feel welcomed. After graduation, Claudia began a certificate program at Columbia and later worked part-time at a data analytics firm. She bounced between her parents' apartment and East 93rd Street. Claudia's mother knew that she was a young adult, and if she made the decision to go to Larry against her parents' will, there was nothing they could have done to stop her, apart from obviously physical intervention. It felt like she was literally hypnotized. Claudia's parents separated in 2013 mainly because of the stress Larry injected into their relationship. Her mother eventually moved out of the city and Claudia started living in hotels. In 2014, Claudia began working as an escort under an assumed name that was a combination of Larry's daughters' names. Her website advertised services for $8,000 a night. She would give her profits to Larry in order to pay for the damage she believed she did in North Carolina. Isabella, Felicia, and Larry continued to live in the apartment on 93rd Street. Santos and Eliza came and went regularly. In 2014, Chen, remember the landlord friend? He actually evicted Larry. Chen was increasingly disturbed by Larry's treatment of the young adults living in the apartment, not to mention the renovations he undertook, like removing the locks from the bathroom doors. Larry responded by countersuing Chen, listing Felicia, Isabella, and Talia as co-plaintiffs. But of course, Larry is not going to go so easily. The case went to trial in early 2015 and Claudia, Isabella, and Eliza testified as witnesses. One of the first questions Larry's attorney, Glenn Ripa, asked Claudia was how long she'd known Larry. The first time she said she heard his name mentioned, according to her, was when she was around 9 years old. Over the course of her hour-long testimony, Claudia laid out an elaborate conspiracy tracing back through 3 generations of her family. She testified that as a child she overheard her grandfather talking about Larry making trouble. Even then, she said she knew Carrick and Giuliani were somehow involved. I mean, it's quite obvious and it sounds just like Larry and his conspiracies and his stories. As Claudia got nearer to college age, she testified Larry's mother contacted Claudia's mother and told her to send Claudia to Sarah Lawrence in order to hurt Larry and Talia. She then went on to testify that after she enrolled at Sarah Lawrence, her family began receiving money from Carrick and those working with him. Carrick ordered Claudia to poison Larry using arsenic, cyanide, mercury, silver, and lead. Carrick denies any involvement in a conspiracy against his former friend. Larry Ray is a psychotic conman who has victimized every friend he's ever had, he says. It's been close to 20 years since I last heard from him, yet his reign of terror continues. Eventually, her list of targets expanded to include Talia, Isabella, and others. Bernie's really happy with your performance, Larry's mother had said, according to Claudia's testimony. Yaliza's testimony echoed Claudia's in both the strangeness and distance from reality. She claimed her own parents had once been drug dealers and money launderers who pimped Felicia out when she was a child. She claimed to have mixed poison into Larry's coffee, and like Claudia, she detailed an exhaustive list of toxins that she used, including heroin, fungicide, LSD, and fecal matter to contaminate his bandages. She said her parents promised to pay her $1 million for her efforts. Throughout the trial, the girls painted a picture of Larry as a guardian of vulnerable youth. Isabella described him as a loving father figure. Claudia called him the nicest, most compassionate person she ever met, explaining that after years of poisoning him, she started to care for him. She believed her testimony was penance. Yaliza similarly described feeling guilty about the supposed poisonings. I went to the hospital again in December of 2013 for another attempt. It was my 3rd attempt, she said. I was feeling badly about everything that I was doing to Larry. And guys, keep in mind that this is a trial for an eviction, not like for something so major and so serious. And this is the stories that they come up with. Chen won the eviction case, although it would take almost another year to get Larry out of the apartment. In September 2015, 9 months after the trial, Larry was in the lobby of the Hudson Hotel with Claudia and Santos when Frank DiTomaso saw him. Remember Frank? He used to be friends with Larry, he owned a construction firm and even hired Larry at one point for his connections. Surveillance footage shows DiTomaso approaches Larry and begins to violently beat him while Claudia and Santos try to stop him. The attack only gave Larry more fuel for his quest to prove the conspiracy against him. He sent a letter to the then US Attorney Preet Bharara outlining the conspiracy against him and met with a special agent at the EPA to try and persuade him to investigate the poisonings. He created a website documenting Claudia's apparent confessions. Quote, "I would poison Talia at least once a day and make sure her entire fridge was poisoned. Put mercury on her toothbrush, began sleeping over in her room more and more frequently to accomplish this goal. Also put arsenic and mercury in her undergarments." End of quote. She claimed to have poisoned beverages at dorm parties. Now you see what Larry's trying to do here. He's now trying to turn the roommates against each other, and he's now trying to point accusations to some of the roommates for poisoning Talia and Larry. One tab on the website linked to a video in which Claudia sits on a duvet-covered bed in dark green Sarah Lawrence Gryphon sweatpants, looking kind of dazed.
So you're saying you put mercury on where? On the doorknobs in the hospital?
Yeah. Your food.
Other things I touched? Or anybody touched?
Yeah.
So is it possible you poisoned medical personnel, like doctors and nurses up there?
Yes.
Look, Claudia, take your hands away from your face.
Yes. I must have. I put it on the doorknob. They came in.
Did you want to poison them? Did you think about it? And you did it anyway? Why?
Because I wanted to poison you. And I didn't care about other people.
Speak up, please.
And I didn't care about other people.
Speak audibly, Claudia.
I didn't care about other people.
Okay, so say again.
I wanted to poison you and I didn't care about other people.
So then what did you do when I was at Columbia?
I spoke to your doctor. I spoke to 2 female doctors there and I told them that I thought that you were abusive and that I thought that you were delusional and that you thought that I had poisoned you, but I thought that I was like, he just pressured me into saying that. And my family, you know, I didn't really have a good family. I just felt like I had to say that to get him to keep talking to me.
To get what?
To get you to keep talking to me.
To say what?
To say that I poisoned you. So I was trying to make it seem like you just pressured me into saying it.
Did you in fact poison me?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I did.
I never stopped poisoning Lawrence Ray, Talia Ray, as well as Felicia and Isabella, she says drowsily facing the camera. Are you making this by your own free will? Asks Larry off screen. Yes, Claudia responds immediately. And you want to make this because of what? Larry asks her. Because I just want to tell the truth, she says. It was obvious that she was under some kind of a drug. Walking across Midtown Manhattan at a slow pace one afternoon, Larry says they want to kill them, referring to Carrick and Frank DiTomaso. He further says they are arrogant, violent and terrible. Isabella is trying to find a quiet restaurant in Murray Hill during happy hour. Very dramatic, stopping in his tracks, Larry asks, "Why all of this for me?" In more than 10 hours of interviews, Larry could be playful, funny and engaging, and sometimes even thrilling. Once, in the backseat of a car chauffeured by his personal driver, he saw a man asking for money and holding a cardboard sign saying, "Marine, 2 tours of duty in Iraq." Larry tells Isabella to give the veteran some money, and she hands him a $100 bill. Another time, Larry pulls out his laptop and opens a spreadsheet. He says lists the total estimated valuation of his 8,867 domain names on GoDaddy.com to more than $28 million. The way Larry's manipulation works is extremely simple, but also extremely overwhelming. His primary conversational tactic is to overwhelm you. He can go on 20-minute unbroken monologues, especially if the subject turns to his victimhood. Everyone in his past, from his defense attorneys to his own mother, is corrupt or biased. He firmly believes that himself, Felicia, Isabella, and Talia have been poisoned and are still being poisoned. We've suffered so much and we are still suffering so much, he says. But when he's pushed for specifics, his reasoning turns circular. Why would his former friends have it in for him? Because they are in a conspiracy, he says. What conspiracy? You tell me, he says. You see what he's doing here? He's being asked a question and he replies with yet another question. He never actually gives an answer. The psychological profile conducted during his 2005 custody proceeding observed that Larry's power and control are exhibited through the process of wearing down the other person to the point of sheer exhaustion, where one must acknowledge that he has no control of the situation. Only Larry has the control. At the Moonstruck Diner on 3rd Avenue, Isabella orders sliders with cheddar cheese, and when Larry orders the same thing, she corrects him by asking if he wanted his with American cheese. He eventually tells the waiter he will have it with American cheese. Larry says he's now living with Isabella and Felicia in New Jersey. His relationship with Isabella is just as cloudy as everything else in his life. Sometimes she's his assistant, carrying his computer and screening his phone calls. Other times he's more like his girlfriend, like when they flirt on the streets of Manhattan. Other times even his corroborating witness, confidently answering questions about her poisoning. When asked if he is romantically involved with Isabella and Felicia, Larry says only that he hasn't been able to have intercourse in years because of the poisoning. In 2020, he explained he was in tremendous pain. He lost teeth, he gets headaches, sometimes he even limps. He seems to have divided the former students into camps. On one side are Talia, Felicia, and Isabella, who are poisoned. On the other side, you have Claudia, Yaliza, and Santos, who he believes are behind the poisonings. According to Larry, when Talia spoke to him, she said she found it difficult sometimes because she wasn't able to do certain things in the regular time it would take. At that point, Talia no longer lived with Larry. She moved in with his stepfather in North Carolina, but they still talked almost every day. Larry refused to talk about some parts of his past because they are either, check this out, classified or would endanger other people. Larry, Talia, Isabella, and Felicia denied almost every assertion made about them, including the sensual humiliation of Daniel. In conversation, however, Larry admitted to taking Claudia's money from escorting. He was quite pleased with Claudia's efforts to pay him back for the damage she did. Obviously, Larry feels he's done nothing wrong, that he helped guide the young people he took under his wing. and yet Larry caused devastation in the lives of people around him. For years, he silenced his victims by intimidating them physically, psychologically, legally, and when all else failed, by public shaming and harassment. Larry now claims to have lost touch with Santos and Eliza, as have their parents, who haven't spoken to their children since 2013, and we are now in 2022. According to one source, Santos spent time in Bellevue Hospital Psychiatric Center and then lived in a homeless shelter as recently as 2016. With every passing year, their parents are haunted by a loss that they cannot begin to understand. It doesn't fit in my mind still, their mother says. They were smart and good with everyone. Asked what she would say to her children if she could speak to them, she didn't hesitate. We forgive them because they are our kids. We love them. Isabella's family also hasn't heard from her. After Larry called that winter break, Isabella's mother, who suffers from depression, was distraught when she couldn't get in touch with her daughter. Isabella hasn't seen her mother since, although she occasionally called her father to ask for money. Her parents are now divorced. At one point, one of Isabella's aunts traveled to New York in the hope of bringing Isabella home. At dinner, Larry spoke for Isabella, who just looked to the aunt unfocused. Larry said she was sick and he was medicating her. They planned to meet up again the next day, but Larry called and cancelled.
Back like months ago.
You're trying to parse again, wanting to meet them.
I'm being honest though.
To meet them. Stick it out, stick the fucking Stick next one's gonna be the head of your cock. Do you understand? See this how it feels? What if I pick you up like that? Can I pick you up by your tongue? Huh? Do you think I'm playing with you? Huh? Huh? You're a grown man, I'm a grown man. I don't like what you did. You hear me? Now one more time and I'm going to split your tongue in half. Do you understand me?
No. Yeah. Yes.
You doubting me, Danny?
No.
Huh?
Yeah. Yes.
Doubting me? Still?
No, I know that.
Huh?
I know that you leave me. Oh.
Want to doubt me more?
No.
Huh?
No.
I'll bust your face right here. I won't wait till I get downstairs.
No.
Take it to the bank. You and I are fighting it out tonight.
Okay.
Man to man. You can even have the hammer. I told you, beat me with it. You don't start the truth. I spent good money to find out these facts, you little piece of shit. And I'm telling you, listen to me.
Yeah.
Listen to me. Don't f*** around with lying now. Tell the truth. Next thing's gonna be out is your dick and balls. Did you like that the other night when your balls were getting strangulated?
No.
Huh? Watch what I do to them tonight. Apologize for lying to everybody right now.
Sorry.
And this just now that you were lying.
I'm sorry for.
Remember, they don't know the facts. I know them, dick. Now.
I didn't destroy my life. Or my sister's life, or my brother's life.
Is he getting hurt?
Yes.
He's walking.
Let's go inside the house, please. Please. Please, Larry.
You're not going in.
Yes.
I told you already you're not getting in. Stop doing this to me. Stop pinching me. You're hurting me, damn it. Stop hurting me.
Let's go inside the house, Larry.
Stop it.
Let's go inside the house.
I've never seen you face like that. You're dangerous.
I'm not dangerous.
Please get a handle on yourself.
Yes, I can get a handle.
Gather yourself.
I'm having a final problem. I got it together now, Larry.
You realize that you've assaulted and hurt Yalitza, your sister, and Isabella?
Yes.
Why did you hurt them?
Because I was angry. Okay, fine. You know what? I up all day, but that doesn't mean I need to go anywhere.
Why do you hurt yourself? Why do you hit yourself?
Because I'm angry.
Why do you pinch yourself?
Because I'm angry.
Why do you want to bruise yourself?
Because I'm angry.
does that do for you?
It makes me feel better.
It makes sense? That makes sense?
Yes, to me it makes sense.
Dr. Rosario. that
Dr.
makes sense.
Rosario, Harvard graduate of Harvard and Columbia. Yes, it makes sense to me.
What happened to you? Who are you?
I don't know what happened to me.
Who are you?
I'm still me. I'm still me. I'm still the one that you met a long time ago. The woman
Who destroyed everything I had. Who hurt Thornton. Who prevented him from getting an attorney. Who put him in the most horrible position he could have been put in. Who damaged his entire property. Who yells and screams, who caused the neighbors to sign complaints against you for weeks, to keep calling.
So fun. You know what? My mind is better now. And I calm down. And Felicia's back.
Oh my God.
Felicia's back to her nappy.
Why are you doing this? Why don't you address this with what the cause of your problem is? Why are you doing this to other people, Felicia?
Because I've been angry. But please, Larry.
What? Okay, you say because you've been angry, so that makes it okay to do to other people?
Larry, please don't send me away.
You sent yourself away. I didn't do it. You screamed so loud all day for hours
Please,
and hours
Congress.
outside.
Please stop it. Please prevent it. Please.
Okay, tell me how.
By calling Glenn back, calling them, and then saying that I'm calm, and I'm happy now, and I'm okay now.
Alright, I'll do that. You think it's gonna work?
Yes, it's going to help, please.
And what if it
Please,
doesn't
Larry.
work?
I don't want to throw myself away.
As for Daniel, he moved to New York after graduation. One night, he stumbled on a website that pointed the characteristics of a cult. Oh! He realized each one tracked Larry's tactics. Larry brought them into a money-making venture, he alienated them from their family and friends, and he put them in the hot seat. He tried talking to a psychologist, but Larry's behavior had so closely mimicked therapy that the process felt impossible. Even the act of making friends felt unsafe for Daniel. When he went to parties, he worried he wouldn't be allowed to leave. Daniel finally found a group for cult escapees and slowly opened up to roommates and girlfriends about his experience. As for his sensual orientation, he now identifies as straight. The new group's horrified reactions helped him gain perspective, and eventually he shared the full extent of what happened with his parents. In early April, Larry called to say he couldn't reach Claudia, and for a good reason. She recently heard from a former employer who didn't speak with her since she asked him for $500,000 to pay back Larry for damaging his property. When they met up, Claudia told him that Larry strapped her to a chair and put a plastic bag over her head until she had almost passed out. But we'll get into more detail about this in just about a minute. Central to the prosecutor's case is the testimony of now 31-year-old Claudia, who says she met Larry Ray in 2011 when she lived at the dorm at Sarah Lawrence College with his daughter Talia. When she began testifying, she said Larry gradually gained control over her through threats and violence. He slapped her in the face so hard that she fell over, pulled her hair, strangled her, suffocated her, and hit her. He threatened to put her in jail numerous times. He threatened to kill her on a memorable occasion. He threatened to cut her face, have her abducted and dropped in the Middle East. He threatened to blackmail people that she knew. He threatened to beat up her father. She turned to prostitution to pay him back after he convinced her that she poisoned him and caused serious damage to his Manhattan apartment and the North Carolina home of a relative, which we know to be his stepfather. She was seeking his approval when she realized he was pleased whenever he heard she was opening up sensually. She went from online dating to working at adult clubs to working for an escort service and eventually advertising adult services online herself, each time garnering approval from Larry and constant reminders that she owed him. He convinced her to chronicle on video and in writing that she poisoned him and damaged his property, and he warned her that she was going to go to prison. Larry told her very graphic things about what people would do to her in prison. After first working as an adult sensual worker in 2015, her rates gradually rose from $250 an hour to $2,000 an hour, as she accepted up to 7 clients a day for several years, turning over the vast majority of money to Larry. He frequently urged her to charge more and to take steps to remain desirable to customers, including being very thin, considering breast enlargement surgery, and doing unusual acts for more income. When she feared she developed bulimia, Larry told her she was trying to sabotage making money. He was scornful, if not angry. He said it wasn't that bad. Claudia Drury testified that she was tortured for hours by Lawrence Ray, stripped down naked in a Manhattan hotel, handcuffed to a chair, and suffocated with a plastic bag as he threatened to kill her. Over the course of 7 or 8 hours, he kept tying her, binding her to a chair, a desk chair in the room, and suffocating her with a plastic bag multiple times, choking her to the point of passing out with a leash and the collar that she had. According to her testimony, Larry forced her into selling herself, then collected the $2.5 million she made from the work for himself, forcing her to work 7 days a week and see as many as 5 men a day to bring in the cash. The horrific 7-hour torture session happened in October of 2018 after Larry became enraged that she told one of her main clients, a man named Stewart, that Larry published a list of her clients on a website. After Larry learned that she divulged the information, she testified that he came to the Gregory Hotel in Midtown, where she was living at the time, with his lieutenant and alleged accomplice Isabella Pollock, who is facing her own charges in the case, and pleaded not guilty. Claudia testified that he demanded she strip naked and handcuffed her legs and hands to a chair with props she used with her clients. He started off by saying, "Trying to hurt my family, trying to hurt me, trying to hurt my family," and he was mad that she told Stewart about the website. He told her to strip naked, and so she did. For the next 7 hours, Larry and Isabella tortured her, repeatedly suffocating her with a plastic bag and putting a pillow over her face as he threatened to kill her. "I was suffocating. I was terrified. I was trembling. You can't breathe. You want to breathe a lot. That just makes it much worse. It was terrifying," she testified in court in Larry's sex trafficking and racketeering trial on Thursday, 24th of March 2022, just a few days ago. At one point, after threatening to waterboard her, he doused her with cold water and moved her in front of an air conditioning vent. After the water evaporated, obviously she became very cold to the point of becoming woozy or dizzy. An audio recording of the alleged violence was played in court as a visibly emotional Claudia testified that she could hear herself choking on the recording. Although she wasn't given any food, she said Larry and Isabella took a break from the torture session to get burgers and fries from the nearby Starlight Diner, telling her to behave while they were gone. When the attack ended, she went back to seeing clients. "I was scared," she said. "I thought that was the only way that I could feel a measure of safety the next day was to have money in hand." She testified she saw the incident as a turning point and was eventually able to flee with the help of her regular client, Stewart, who set her up in a hotel in Philadelphia and helped her pay for an attorney. On cross-examination, Larry's defense attorney, Marn Lennox, attacked Claudia's credibility, referencing her own admission she told stories to impress her friends in the past. The attorney also pointed out that Claudia had initially been untruthful with prosecutors in 2020 and lied to authorities to try to help Larry avoid an eviction from his home. The lawyer also questioned whether Claudia viewed SEX work as life-affirming and said she voluntarily worked at the SEX club before starting her own website to advertise her work services. Claudia's testimony was interrupted when Larry had some type of a medical episode and was rushed to hospital. The ambulance trip was actually the second time in a week that the trial was interrupted. So, what did he do? Did he fake a panic attack? I mean, allegedly, the first time he was rushed to hospital, he had some kind of a seizure. I don't believe anything that this man does is real. I honestly don't. I don't believe for a second that he was so sick. Poor Larry, poor Lawrence Larry Ray. This was yet another manipulation tactic, and he was trying to get back control. He wanted the spotlight on him, not on Claudia. Ray, now 62 years old, is facing a series of charges against him, including SEX trafficking and extortion, forced labor, and other offenses for running the shady operation at the school. If convicted, he could face up to life in prison. Even after his arrest, Larry tried to regain control of his group, including asking his father to let Isabella Pollock know that they signed on forever. In March 2021, Isabella was hit with a slew of crimes, including money laundering associated with being Larry's alleged lead agent who willingly joined his criminal scheme. I've been smiling and crying for the past 2 days, said Claudia's mother after hearing of her daughter's escape. What's really amazing is she is strong enough to be getting through this. She was strong enough to say, okay, this is enough, I've got to get out of here. 2 weeks after Claudia left New York, Larry was still trying to find her. He even sent her an email saying, quote, "You said you would never run and hide, and I have no understanding as to why you are doing so now. In my experience, the truth has always been important to you, and proper regard for the truth has always helped you. You asked me to promise to never abandon you, and I have not." End of quote. Santos Rosario admitted to jurors that he was initially enthralled by Larry when he showed up at the New York College in 2010. Just 19 at the time and the one-time boyfriend of Talia, Santos described Larry as a cool and very inspirational man who would often cook for the dorm. "I ended up confiding in him issues that I had with my family, the depression I struggled with in high school," he said, adding that he found Larry to be very inspirational. Prosecutors say that Larry used his history to tell his daughter's friends stories before eventually preaching about his personal philosophy and conducting therapy sessions. Santos added that part of that philosophy was the importance of honesty. During the therapy sessions, Larry learned intimate details about their private lives, vulnerabilities, and mental health struggles under the pretense of helping them. He made them feel special so he could extort them. Santos and his friend group were so enthralled by Ray they spent most of their summer before junior year at his Upper East Side apartment that he also helped remodel. Eventually, the fall of 2011, Larry's behavior turned more sinister. It turned into an escalating pattern of verbal and physical. Santos said Larry would call him a bitch, trash, hemorrhoid, and scum. He allegedly physically harmed Santos, which consisted of being hit, slapped, having a knife held to his throat and genitals, and being put into a chokehold until he passed out. When asked to describe how he felt by Ray's behavioral shift, he simply said, "terrified." Prosecutors also argued that Larry alienated several of the victims from their parents and convinced several of the victims that they were broken and in need of fixing. Now, remember Detective Carrick? Well, he told the Daily Beast that based on the allegations against Lawrence Ray, it's not shocking that the master manipulator and nut is facing trial for his actions. I haven't seen this guy in more than 20 years, Carrick said. When you read some of this stuff, you would think we were best friends until last week. But if these reports are true, this guy belongs in prison for the rest of his life. What he did to these kids, what he did to their parents, he has altered their minds, he has destroyed their families, he bankrupted families. It's complete insanity. End of quote. The former police commissioner added that one of the major allegations the defense tries to pose is that Carrick directed some of the Sarah Lawrence students to poison Larry Ray, a claim that makes no sense considering Carrick was in prison from 2010 to 2014. He actually had these kids saying, I don't know if they believed what they were saying, that they had met with me and I had given them things. I was in prison then, when that shit was going on. I wasn't even around, he said. But there would be a major issue in this trial, which I'm afraid will only either lessen his sentence or be declared a mistrial. I have no idea, but I have a feeling that this will go really wrong. Larry's trial, which included multiple suspensions due to health scares, went terribly wrong when the Department of Justice admitted on Tuesday, March 22nd, that he released a list of alleged clients tied to the cult. Among the clients listed in the report that leaked to reporters were a former New York State Supreme Court judge, high-profile lawyers, hedge fund managers, businessmen, a painter, and Ivy League architecture professor. A slew of prominent Wall Street titans, justice officials, and artists. One person on the list is a financier who also appears in billionaire Jeffrey Epstein's notorious Little Black Book, which I'm going to dedicate an entire video on. Another name also appears on one of the Big Apple's museums. A Gap Inc. executive and her husband and an Amazon account executive are also listed. The list of clients had been entered into evidence under seal but was temporarily released to the public. It was actually uploaded to a server or an online platform where the court usually uploads everything for media reporters to use for public knowledge. So it was a mistake there. In total, 121 names were leaked to reporters. According to the Daily Mail, the list was compiled and included in an email by former Sarah Lawrence student Claudia Drury, who has been testifying and giving evidence against Larry Ray. Pre-order of the court, Government Exhibit 3217 was admitted under seal. A spokesman for the Department of Justice wrote in an email after the leak. This file was inadvertently loaded to the US versus Ray file share. Please do not reproduce, share, or use this exhibit in any way. If you have downloaded this file, please delete it. Now, the media, obviously, they go hold of the file and the names. However, because of the legal implications of this and because of this specific request by the court, by the US Attorney's Office, obviously the reporters cannot publish the names. They have the names, they have all the names, however, they are not allowed to publish the names. The last thing that I want to touch on, I feel like this video took forever. The last thing that I want to touch on before I end this video, which seems to me like it took a really long time, is the charges that the state is looking at bringing against Isabella and Talia. Honestly, I kind of don't agree with that. I think that these girls are completely innocent. Talia, his own daughter, was manipulated and brainwashed by him for a very long time. Remember when she was 15 years old and she accused her mom of violence against her and her sister? He completely brainwashed her, and it was so bad that she turned to youth shelters rather than going back to live with her mom. And even to this day, she doesn't keep in touch with her mom. It just goes to show the level of manipulation and control Larry has on his own daughter. He was fully running a cult. 100%. Talia was an unwilling member in it. The same goes for Isabella. Even though she stuck by him to the end, he made sure to control her even after his arrest, when he sent his father to speak with her. The level of control that he had on her was far bigger than the one he had on his daughter. Him and Isabella were also in a sexual relationship, so of course the control over her was far greater. I honestly believe that these two girls are victims and completely innocent in all of this. And I strongly believe Isabella will stick by him till the end. If she is charged, she will just accept these charges because she is brainwashed. And if she is not supported but accused and charged, she will never recover. She's been controlled and manipulated for so long that she doesn't know anything else anymore. You only need to look at Jonestown and Jim Jones. 900 people, over 900 people took their own lives at the direction of one man, Jim Jones. It just goes to show the extent at which someone can be manipulated and controlled. As fascinating as I found this case, it's beyond me how someone can exert this level of control over someone else. You need to be extremely smart and cunning to be able to pull it off. I haven't researched cult leaders as much as true crime in general, but I know they all have in common manipulation, brainwashing and control. But more than fascinating, I find it heartbreaking. Those students' lives were destroyed, their families were destroyed. So many people's lives were affected by Lawrence Ray. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Please do let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. Do you think that Isabella should be charged as well as Larry? Or do you think that she's a victim in all of this? Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up or thumbs down, whichever way you prefer. Either way, it helps me and my channel. And again, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, please make sure you turn the notification bell on so you are notified of any new uploads on the channel. And if you ever want to buy me a coffee, I'm leaving the link for you on the screen, and it will also be in the description down below. For now, take care and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!